Well, hello everybody. I'm back. Today is my favorite day because I get to do two things I love. My nails and discuss books. If you're new here, welcome to the Nail Coven. Sometimes while I'm doing my nails, I talk about the latest book I've read, and that's what I'm doing today. I tried to look like fire today, or like a fire person, because the title of the book we are discussing today is The Pool of Fire. It is the final book in the Tripod Trilogy that we have been discussing for weeks. So we finally get the end of the story and find out what happens to Will and the tripods and the whole earth. So let's start. I'm going to start with prepping my nails, pushing back the cuticles, all that stuff. Oh, but before we do that, I am actually going to shorten these because these are getting pretty long for me. So I'm going to shorten these, change up the shape, and have cute little short nails. So this book starts with Will being relieved from his guard duty. He's on guard duty and someone comes up and says, "Hey, I'm here to, relieve you from your guard duty." So he's walking through some mountainous caves and he's recalling his return back to the White Mountains after his time in the city of Golden Lead. Him and Beanpole had made their way back to the White Mountains. But when they got there, everybody was gone. Julius had the foresight that if Will and Fritz were found out, that he should evacuate their headquarters. So after Will had left to go to the games, Julius had the White Mountains evacuated and they went to a new location. And this is where he's at now. When Will showed back up, him and Beanpole had shown back up to the White Mountains and nobody was there, Julius had left a guard on duty in case they came back. So when they got back, he took them to the new headquarters in these new caves that were east of the White Mountains. So they lived in a series of caves in a hilly pinewood area. There were many entrances to these caves and had to be guarded in case of attack from the tripods. Will had to be relieved from his guard duty because he had been summoned by Julius in order to attend a conference, since he was the only living person to have gone into the city of Golden Lead and returned. He's the only one who has seen a master face to face. So as Will enters the cave where the conference is being held, Julius stood to greet him. Will had been back from the city for about a month. Will had told Julius everything about his experience, as well as giving him some samples of the air and water that he had snuck out. He also told him about the ship that was coming from the Master's home planet that had machines that would transform the Earth's atmosphere into a breathable atmosphere for the Masters, and that it would kill all earthly life. This ship was expected in 4 years. Julius begins his speech to the conference. He tells them that their plan was ready and that he will tell it to them now. He says that each one of them had a part to play and would be told what that is individually. Then a man named Pierre stands up, and Julius tells him, there would be time for him to speak later. Pierre had been a member of the council, but wasn't any longer. He was one of the few to speak against Julius. So he tells Julius what he has to say was better said sooner than later, and Julius allows this. So Pierre tells Julius that he's ordering rather than asking men who were free. He says that others had ideas about how to defeat the tripods, to not just the council. Julius responds to him that, free men may govern themselves in different ways, that if they were going to work together, some of their freedom must be surrendered, but that it is surrendered voluntarily and temporarily. And that, if those that do not agree, they're free men too and are free to leave. But Pierre argues that the council makes all the decisions and that the council is under Julius's control. So where's the freedom in that? It's only the appearance of freedom. Julius tells Pierre that there will be time to discuss how they shall be governed, but after the tripods are defeated. They got to take care of that problem first, right? Pierre's kind of getting ahead of himself. So Julius resumes his speech and tells everyone that before he tells them what the plan is, he wanted Will, the only one who has been inside the city of the enemies, to speak. Will kind of finds it difficult to speak since the recollection of his experience is painful, but everyone was listening intently, and when he finished, he could tell that he had had an impact on them. When Will finishes, Julius tells the crowd that he wanted them to hear Will's story in order to encourage them, to show them that the masters are not all powerful, that they have weaknesses, and that they can be defeated. Julius then tells everyone of the ship that is coming and about the short time that they have. The council had decided that the most important thing was to speed up their efforts to recruit the uncapped. They must send out as many as possible to win over young people and to set up cells of resistance all over the world that could then set up other cells, especially around the other two cities of the masters. One laid to the east and one to the west across the Great Ocean. A base had also been set up in order to research and experiment with ways on how to destroy the masters, and only those who would be working there would be told where the location is. It's top secret stuff. So Julius ends the speech asking if anyone has any questions or suggestions, but no one speaks up. He then says that, this would be the last time that they would be meeting together until the masters are destroyed. He also says that while their task is tremendous and frightening, to not let it frighten them. That it can be done, but it can only be done if each one gives everything they have. So later, Will meets with Julius, and he's given his assignment, what role he's going to play in all of this. And what he's going to have Will do is pose as a traveling merchant. And he's going to set up resistance cells and then come back to the location that they're at. Then Will finds out later that his friends, Henry, is being sent across the sea to a land called America, where one of the other cities is located. Beanpole is going to be sent to the research center, naturally, though, he doesn't know where that is exactly. So over the next few weeks, Will is instructed on how to set up these resistance cells. And one day during his training, he is summoned by Julius. So Will goes to meet with Julius, see what he wants. Julius expresses to him some concerns he has about Will. Will is a very compulsive person. And he's thinking, when he sends him out to set up resistance cells, he should probably send someone with him, someone to, balance those impulses and help him out. But Will knows, oh yeah, he's really sending a babysitter with me. And he doesn't like this idea. Will tells Julius that, he's capable of doing it himself. He doesn't need anyone to take care of him. Julius is like, well, would you rather not go at all? Because we could, that could be an option. And Will says no, he would rather go with somebody else than not get to go at all. And Julius says, okay, great. He's like, would you like to meet who your traveling companion is going to be? And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Guess who it is. I was shocked at this part. I was not expecting this. It was Fritz. Fritz from the last book, who was assumed dead. So Fritz, tells Will what happened, how he got away. So after Will had left, Fritz had planned to follow him out of the river in 3 days. Will knew this. He was supposed to wait on the outside of the city for 3 days for Fritz to come up out of the river, just how Will had. The night that Fritz and Will had spent searching for the river left Fritz exhausted. He was, already in bad shape, and then just a difficult night just left him exhausted, and he ended up in the hospital again. He had already told, everyone that Will had gone to the place of happy release because, with his master being dead, Will felt he, just had no purpose in life anymore as a slave naturally would. And everyone believed him. So they weren't questioning anything about Will or Will's master being dead. But with Fritz being in the hospital for well over the 3 days that Fritz and Will had discussed, he figured, Will surely has gone on his way. So what Fritz did was he used his time in the hospital to rest and build up some strength. And then he told everybody at the hospital that, he just didn't feel like he was getting any better and that he couldn't serve his master anymore. So he was just going to go to the place of happy release. And he said, farewell. And then he ended up going to the river instead. So Fritz did fine getting out of the city through the river. But then when he was heading back towards the White Mountains, he got really sick. He got pneumonia. Luckily, a farmer found him and treated him and took care of him. He got better, and then he continued on his way to the White Mountains. When he got there, of course, everyone was gone, except for a guard that had been left in case, members of the community who were out on missions came back. And the guard brought him to the new headquarters. And that's how he got there, standing now in front of Will, who had had a lot of guilt associated with Fritz not making it. So Fritz and Will set out on their mission, posing as peddlers. They went south to the land of the Italians, and there they were welcomed everywhere they went because they had amazing goods to sell. So they traveled from village to village, posing as peddlers. They would make friends with those that were, not capped yet, kind of joking and having fun. They would then give them little gifts to kind of gain their trust. They would then steer the conversations, trying to kind of suss out those who were rebellious or who had started to question the tripod's right to rule. So their procedure was to kind of find the one or two who were seeming like they were both pretty sound of mind and reliable. And then right before Will and Fritz would leave town, they'd pull them to the side and basically tell them everything. And, tell them how to set up their cells of resistance. They then tell them that they should find the others that are like them in their village or town, and then basically run away and find somewhere to live and just, hang out and build cells of resistance, and then to continue recruiting from nearby villages and towns, and then just await instructions. So then they begin moving east, and soon they're coming upon, land that they are not familiar with, terrain like deserts that, they've never have encountered before. And it's getting more and more difficult to find food and water, both for them and their horses. One day, Fritz's horse actually dies, and this kind of upset Will because, he was very fond of his horse. His horse name is Crest, and he loves him very much. So then to see Will's horse die really, worried Will. So at the next town, they tried to buy another horse, but found that to be offensive in this culture, since horses are for championship and for the well-to-do. But they did have a beast of burden in this land, and the way they describe it, it's a camel. Will wants to buy it, but Fritz objects, since they soon would be coming to the point in their journey where they should turn back towards home, and a camel would attract too much attention, which was the last thing that they wanted. Also, this animal, he wasn't accustomed to the land that they were headed back to, so it could die. Will was like, yeah, you're right. Bad idea. So they end up buying 2 donkeys. They didn't have much luck in this land with recruits. The cult of the tripods, as they call it, is very strong here. A priest would call everyone to a tripod-shaped altar 3 times a day to worship it. And, the 2 of them play along, and they mutter along with the prayers while they're in this country. But now it is time to head back home. They take a different route home in order to continue recruiting. When they get to close to home, they decide to rest for the night in the next town. When they get there, they found an excitement in the air. There's some kind of celebration going on. Lots of out-of-towners around. And they ask what's going on, and the answer they get is horrifying to them. So the people in this town call it the hunt. One day a year, the tripods come, and the town has kept any prisoners. And on this day, they would release them for the tripods to hunt down and kill. And the people would watch this like it was a sporting event. Will did not want to stay and witness such an awful thing, but Fritz insisted that maybe there was some useful information there. So they stay the night there. And the next morning, there's a tripod standing over an open field. And the town is up early for the festival, and it's decorated, and there's vendors out selling food and toys that are shaped like tripods. So Will and Fritz find a vantage point over the crowds, and they watch a saddled horse is brought out onto the field. Then some men in uniforms are escorting a man who seems bewildered or confused or something, and they help this man up to a saddled horse. Apparently, the rules are, if the man can outride the tripod and make it to a river that's nearby, then the tripod will stop its pursuit and he'll be a free man. So the first contestant is up, and a hush falls over the crowd. Then a bell rings, and the rider takes off towards the river. When the rider is about a quarter mile away from the tripod begins the pursuit. The tripod is moving towards the rider, but obviously not at full speed. It reaches him, and a tentacle comes down and picks him up. Then a second tentacle grips him and rips him in 2. Then the tripod goes back to the original position, and prepares for another hunt. So then a second prisoner is given a better show, or he gives a better show. He is able to avoid the tripod quite a bit longer than the first, but eventually his fate catches up to him and he's killed. So a few weeks later, they make it home to the caves. They've been away for about a year, and they're allowed to rest for 3 days, and then they're called by their commander. They are to report to a place only referenced by a point on the map. They're not given like a name of what this place is called or even what they're going to. And not even the commander knows where they're headed exactly. He knows where they're headed, but not for what purpose. It takes them 2 days on horseback to get there. So they come to a coastline and see the ruins of an ancient castle. So this must be where they are going. And they ride into the courtyard, but there's no signs of life. Doesn't seem like anybody's around. But soon they see a dim light coming toward them, and then they make out who is walking towards them. And it's Beanpole. Yay! They're friends. So he takes them to where they will sleep for the night. There's been some rooms converted or, refurbished in this castle. And at breakfast the next morning, they meet with Julius. Julius tells them that this is a research center and that they are researching how to defeat the masters. He says that despite the information that, Will and Fritz had brought back from the city, they still didn't know that much about the masters. And what they need is a master alive so that they can study him. And that is why they have been brought there. So they were brought there because they had seen the inside of a tripod when they were taken from the games to the city. And if they are going to get their hands on a master, it would have to be from a tripod. So they had studied the samples that they had brought back from the city and have figured out a way to recreate their environment. They have a place to put a master with an airlock that will allow humans to pass through it. They also constructed a similar environment, but in like a transportation device so that they could move the master from the tripod to the research station. But Will and Fritz have a lot of questions. How are they even going to do this? Like, what about the tripod? Even if they manage to attack a tripod and capture a master, soon other tripods will show up and find the castle. Julius tells them, well, that's why they will need to attack farther up the coast and then bring the master on a boat to the castle. So how are they supposed to bring a tripod down? The people at the research center have been studying the tripods, observing them, and about 50 miles north of the castle, one comes by every 9 days. So they will wait for one to pass, then they will have 9 days to dig a hole and cover it with bush. But still, they can communicate with the city, but Julius says that they have a way to deal with that too. Now, Julius wants them to tell them everything about the inside of the tripod that they can remember. So they are at the castle for a week preparing for this. Beanpole tells them that on an expedition to a great ruin, they found a huge library and they were learning and recreating the wonders of the ancients. They have electricity now and are working on more. So they set up a camp a few miles away from where the tripod will pass. And when it did, they went to work digging to set up this trap. It took them 8 days to dig and camouflage the pit. Then they took their positions waiting. Beanpole is a ways away with the other scientists working something that they called a jammer that will send invisible rays that will cause the master's communication devices to not work. Okay, so my camera died, of course. Sorry about that. I don't know. It was totally charged and then it just wasn't. So I went ahead and filled these because, I don't know, I hate stopping what I'm doing. So just continue like nothing happened, okay? So I think this is where I left off. So they had a way of dealing with the communication between the tripods and the cities so that when they attacked them, they would not be able to let anyone know and send help. But about a mile before their trap, it kind of stops in mid-stride, like it's been alerted to something. Then after about a minute, it changes course. So it's not gonna be walking over their trap. So everyone that was, hiding in the trees and the bushes and stuff, they all come running out. And one of the scientists who was operating the jammer was like, oh, I think I started the jammer too soon. They must have picked up on the equipment and just, for safety, took a different course. So they would have to try again in another 9 days. But the next time the tripod comes around, it takes the same identical course it had when it changed courses. Like it didn't go back to its original course. So they're like, great, more time wasted. Beanpole then suggests that they try to lure the tripod back onto its original course. He recalls the story of when Will and him were on the raft and the tripod seemed to be curious about what they were doing. So they do seem curious about variations in human behavior that they've never seen before. So then they try to think, okay, well, what could draw the tripod's curiosity? Beanpole, the smart one, brings up that they must like green. They are green. A lot of their buildings were green. And what about a green man on a green horse? Probably draw its attention. And Will, of course, volunteers. Him and his horse Crest. So they build a bridge over the pit so that Will be able to ride Crest over the bridge, over the pit, and the tripod will just follow him right over it and then fall into the pit. They also mark where the bridge is so that Will be able to see where it is while it's all camouflaged with bush and grass so that the tripod cannot see it. So they dye Crest a emerald green color, and then they get Will some pants and shirt to match, and then they also paint Will's face to match. So Will waits out in the open, hoping that this tripod, when it comes around again, will notice him, and it does. And so immediately Will and Crest take off running. So Will can tell that the tripod is gaining on him by the sound of the pounding of his footsteps. Then he hears a whistle of metal, and he knows that the tentacle is coming down, probably to grab him. So he veers Crest right to avoid it. The tentacle must have nipped Crest because Crest goes falling down and throws Will over his head. So Will hits the ground rolling and makes it to his feet. He's running and he looks over his shoulder to see the tripod has stopped momentarily, picking up Crest for inspection. But then it drops poor Crest from 60 feet up in the air, and Crest hits the ground in a broken heap. Then the tripod turns its attention back to Will. Will makes it across the pit, and the tripod trips when one of its feet steps into the pit, sending the hemisphere crashing to the ground. So in minutes, the team has used a metal cutting machine to penetrate the door of the tripod. They put a mask on one of the dazed masters, get him in the box that they made for the master, and it has horses strapped to it, and it takes off en route to the boat near the closest shore. They quickly try to clean up any trace of themselves, even though the scene will obviously alert the masters to an organized rebellion. I mean, it's pretty much a declaration of war, but still, why leave any unnecessary clues? They wash the dye off of Crest, just in case, they ever want to use that trick again. Will wants to bury Crest, but obviously there's no time for that. On Will's way back to the boat with everyone else, you can tell he's pretty upset and sad over Crest, and he really wants to cry, but he's trying really hard not to. So the cart containing the master is hauled onto the fishing boat, and as they sail away, they can see the demolished tripod with green smoke coming out. The other masters, they're surely dead, and it seemed that the jammer must have worked because there weren't any other tripods, coming yet anyway to inspect the scene. Once they are back at the castle, Julius leaves to attend some pressing matters. Will and Fritz stay behind as guards. They're going to guard this master that they've captured. So when Will gets back as well, he finds out that his new commanding officer is Ulf. Remember Ulf from the barge? Ulf is not a fan of Will's, especially after everything that happened. Ulf clearly remembers Will and the way he pissed him off. And no matter what Will does to comply with his orders and show Ulf that he is, not the same boy as was on the barge, Ulf continues to put more duties on Will than others and follow up with tongue lashings, and he's just treating Will unfairly. Will's patience is growing thinner and thinner, but at least he has Fritz and Beanpole to talk to, during his off times and to help him calm down. He also has another distraction. Rookie. Part of Will and Fritz's job is to attend to Rookie. They can enter his chamber through an airlock and wear masks that they had worn, similar as when they were in the city. They even made him a wading pool in his chamber, just like they have in the city of Golden Lead. That helps them acclimate to this atmosphere. So when he is first brought there, he seems to be in a state of shock for the first few days. Then seems to get what Will recognizes as the sickness, like his master had when he was in the city. So Will knew what was going on. But unfortunately, they have no way of treating him. So they kind of just have to hope that he will get better on his own. And luckily he does. And he starts to find interest in food again. They make an attempt to speak to him in several languages, but he doesn't respond. They start to worry that maybe they captured, of course, the one master that has not been trained in the languages of Earth, as all the rest of them seem to have been. So Will and Fritz then are instructed to not replace the water in his pool. Of course, Rookie doesn't like this, and he makes an attempt, using his tentacles, making sign language that he wants his water replaced in his pool. But, the boys were told not to do that, so they kind of just ignore him. And then all of a sudden, in German, he says, "Bring me water, I need to bathe." Now, once the secret is out that, that Rookie can understand them and talk to them, he doesn't attempt to go mute again. It's like, what's the point? They know. But he also isn't very forthcoming when asked questions. He'll answer some of the time, but stays silent other times. But they can't really find his reasoning on what questions he will answer and which ones he won't. When they ask him his name, he tells them it's Rookie, and Will had not even known that they had names. When he was in the city, he was instructed to address all of them as master, and they only ever addressed him as boy. Now, Will and Fritz are instructed to try and make conversation with Rookie as much as they can, and then to report back to the scientists word for word what they say. Rookie doesn't always engage, but at times he does. When the subject of slaves comes up, it turns out that he was one of the masters who were opposed to slaves. He says that most who were opposed to this were opposed to it not because they were being considerate of the lives that were being mistreated, but because they felt that slaves created dependency that might weaken the strength of the masters and eventually hinder their will to survive and to continue conquering worlds throughout the universe. Rookie, though, seemed to have a genuine feeling of sympathy towards the slaves. Though Rookie did not think it was wrong for them to conquer the earth and to cap humans, he still did not think it was okay to bring them into their cities as slaves. And he actually almost seemed impressed by what his captives had accomplished, but told them, it was no use. They cannot overthrow the masters. The scientists, they study him in formal settings like taking blood, probing, and staring through magnifying glasses. He doesn't seem to mind this actually too much, and only ever complains about the water in his pool or how cold the room is. The scientists also tamper with his food, seeing how he might react. They put certain substances into his food, but he seems to have an uncanny knack for sensing anything different in his food, and he won't eat it. One day, Ulf calls for Will, and Will notices one change in Ulf since the barge, and that was that he was no longer a drinker. Interesting. But a messenger comes. The messenger turns out to be an acquaintance of Ulf's, and he has 2 jars of schnapps. Now, Will isn't sure if just, seeing an old friend, or the fact that maybe, Ulf wasn't drinking just because he didn't like what they had to drink at the castle, and that he did like schnapps. But for whatever reason, he falls off the wagon. When his friend leaves, he leaves with him a bottle of the schnapps. After his friend leaves, he's also, kind of in a melancholy mood, and he begins to get drunk on this schnapps, which is very bad for a commander to do. So Will is preparing Rookie's food, and he passes Ulf at his desk. One of the jars of schnapps is sitting on his desk, and Ulf calls Will, asking him, where is he going, and why hasn't he lit the lamps yet? Will's like, it's not time to light the lamps yet. Ulf tells Will to light the lamps, but Will's like, but it's against regulation. He's not supposed to do it for like another 15 minutes. And Ulf gets upset, and he tells Will to do what he's saying. Don't be insubordinate. Words are stumbling. So Will puts the tray down, and he does what he says. And so when Will's finished, he asks if that was all, and may he continue with his duties. Ulf's like, oh, what? Can't wait to go see your lizard friends. Will's just like, oh my gosh, can I just go and do this, please? So he starts to walk away, and Ulf is like, wait. Ulf pours some of the schnapps into Rookie's food. Will knows he should not give this to Rookie. The scientists did not sanction this. How are they supposed to study something they don't know is going on? But Will sees an opportunity to get his tormentor in trouble and hopefully fired. He asks contemptuously, "Is that an order, sir?" And Wolf's like, "Do as you're told." Will knows that Rookie will probably refuse the food, sensing that there's something new and different in it. And that then the scientists will be like, "Wait a minute, but we didn't have you put anything in his food. What's going on here?" And that, what Wolf has done will come to light. As Will reaches Rookie's cell, he hears Wolf bellow out something, but he ignores it, and he serves Rookie his meal. When Will returns, Wolf says to, belay that order. He's come to his senses. And make Rookie a new tray. But Will says, "Sorry, I already served it as instructed." Wolf tells him to get it and says, "You know what, never mind, I'm coming with you." So when they get to the cell, the bowl is empty and Rookie is laid out on the floor, motionless. Now, some time later, a conference is called by the castle commander, which Julius attends. The commander announces the discovery that the schnapps had paralyzed the master, and that if they could get some into the water supply, this would give them a chance at destroying the city of Golden Lake and the other two cities as well. So I'm filled, I'm filed. All I have left to do is design work, but I'm going to finish up a big chunk of this story first since our time table got messed up here. So Julius says that they know that the masters have water purification plants in their cities, so that any water coming in from the river, remember the river they escaped in, would be purified. So this means that they would need to get a team into the city where they could then contaminate the drinking supply. Now, how in the heck do you get all the stuff that you need to make schnapps, distill it, all the equipment, all the ingredients? Like, how do you do that when you're going to have to enter the city through a river, a little tiny opening that they had discovered where the river enters the city? So the opposite of how they got out of the city. They know that the masters have sugars and stuff like that in the city for making the slaves food, but they'll still have to somehow get in the equipment for the distilling process. And they'll have to do it in all three cities simultaneously. So Julius tells the castle commander to go ahead with the preparations. And it took over a year to prepare everything for the expedition. 6 of them are in a troop. 6 of them are going to go into the city and try and do this. Fritz is the troop leader. They descend onto the city in the middle of the night. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end there. And in the next video, we will be doing our design work. We will also finish up the final book of the Tripod Trilogy, The Pool of Fire. Finally get to know what's going to happen. The tripods ruling our Earth. What we're going to do with them. If you liked this video, let me know by giving it a thumbs up. It's how I decide what kind of videos to make. So if I get likes on this kind of video, I'll make more of these kind of videos. Or if I get more likes on other kinds of videos I'll make more of those kinds of videos. Make sure and subscribe and hit the notifications bell so that you'll know when I upload new videos. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!